Welcome to Agile to Agility podcast with Milan Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this another level.
Good day. So this presentation is really about the different type of value streams you need in a digital operating model in IT organization. And just to think about, often we talk about DevOps and the software engineering value stream from, let's say, introducing new features, but there's more. And I would like to show you that what kind of flows do you need in an IT organization. My name is Akershoek. I'm IT management, DevOps architect, and I'm typically involved in larger organizations to engineer and build their end-to-end value streams, look at the tooling and the processes and the data and the people side. Now, let's have a look at the agenda for this presentation. Now, first of all, I would like to briefly setting the scene. So what's happening in the organization nowadays in an IT and in DevOps world. Then we look at what are value streams, what is value stream management, what kind of value streams and capabilities do you need in a modern digital organization. And then we're going to look at some of the practices that you typically see people using in these end-to-end value streams like DevOps, but also site reliability engineering, for example, and many other practices. And then we're going to look at the data and the data flows. Because data-driven IT is very central to that value stream management. And I would like to show you what kind of data do you need in a digital organization. How do you connect everything together in a more integrated ways of delivering? Now let's have a look at the digital operating model. This picture I use a lot to explain there's a lot of things happening in many larger organizations. So many organizations are reorganizing their IT function, combining with business and IT together. And as you can see in this pictures, there's a lot of things changing nowadays when we look at how we deliver value to a customer. One look at it is the organizational side. We reorganize our model, that we create self-steering autonomous teams organized around products. And at the same time, we see the architecture model of our applications and services is changing. Instead of large monolithic applications, we move into smaller microservices, API-based, smaller component-based applications. Now we see the development model is changing from waterfall to more DevOps, organized around a product team, accountable for the full life cycle. And at the same time, we see the release model is changing, more frequent releases, learn fast, and not just to introduce new features, but it could be as well as providing fixes for vulnerabilities and issues we have in production. And then the practice model is changing. That's what we're going to focus on today, the whole value stream management practices. So in the past, an IT organization was often organized or using a lot of processes like ITIL process with incident, development, test management processes. But now we look at how all these processes need to be integrated into a more end-to-end value stream. We see our hosting models changing in many organizations, moving to cloud and containers, and the sourcing models. Instead of having large outsourcing deals, we work with a lot of vendors in the market. So the ecosystem is changing as well. Multiple vendors we work with in there for specific services. And we see the support model is changing as well, from service desk support to more self-service and self-help. But what the real challenge is that many organizations are facing, that this is a hybrid world we live in. It's not just everything is DevOps or everything is cloud. It's typically hybrid, where we still have traditional project management methodologies together with agile delivery and DevOps. We still have legacy applications running on premise. We do have cloud native applications. We still have outsourced a lot of services to vendors, and we suddenly find dependencies where we ask the vendor to deploy something because our teams are not allowed to deploy on their infrastructure, for example. So we see many challenges in a hybrid model. And I think that's the key challenge for many organizations. Now, the question that we're going to talk about today is how digital ready is your digital operating model, or how digital ready are your IT processes to generate value for the customer? So if a new demand comes in, to generate basically the decision of to invest in this, to build and test and deploy changes. And typically, if you look at the complexity in many organizations, and if you look at this picture, how a new idea starts somewhere and how do you get something in production? That is typically a very complex journey for many digital teams. It's not just because there's a complex end-to-end processes, but typically fragmented teams, tools, and data. And nowadays, we more look into this as an end-to-end flow, end-to-end value stream. So how do we engineer this end-to-end picture? And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do you create a bigger system view on these end-to-end flows? And value streams are basically a key ingredient of this in the IT organization and business as well, by the way. And there are many different practices out there that talk about value streams nowadays. We have the value stream VSM consortium. We have ITIL still, more the traditional service management practices. In ITIL 4, customer journeys and value streams are becoming a key construct. Today, SAFE was mentioned a few times as well, not always in the best sense, by the way, but they focus on value streams and they make a distinction between operational value streams and development value streams. And IT for IT, which is a standard from the Open Group, is also focusing on value streams. By the way, IT for IT is a standard that's focused on the data flows that you need in an organization that is really underpinning these value streams. And I'm a co-chair of the IT for IT forum within the Open Group, developing and maintaining this standard. And now we're going to use these different concepts together today to talk about these value streams. Now, if you think about value streams, we often talk about the business value streams, focusing on the actual value that we deliver to our customers and the customer journeys. Think about order to cash, for example, or marketing to lead. And any business has a specific number of value streams. And those business value streams are enabled by many different product teams and services like a CRM system, web shop, or logistics systems out there. But now today we're going to focus on the supporting value streams, the IT value streams, or the software engineering value streams. How do we enable and deliver these products and services to underpin the business value streams? So here we talk about the IT value streams of designing, building, testing, and deploying it. And we're going to zoom into what's actually, there are more value streams, by the way, within IT. It's not just delivering new features, but there's also we need to fix incidents. We have to support requests from end users, for example. But we're going to focus today on the supporting the IT value streams of delivering digital services and products. If you think about the value stream management, most organizations, they understand the value stream. This is a short definition. A value stream is typically triggered by a demand or a trigger, like a new request coming in. And then the outcome is delivered to the customer, generating value for that specific customer and stakeholders. And this end-to-end value stream is enabled by different IT management tools in this case, like maybe it's a Jira Backlog tool, development, testing tools, and so on. And there's a lot of data involved. And we're going to focus today on looking at what kind of data does flow through these value streams. And then value stream management sits on top of that, is basically about engineering these value streams. Who is architecting the value streams? And we get new roles in an organization, like a value stream architect. We need to design these value streams and support them with the right set of tools, the right set of integrations, and be able to monitor and evaluate and continuously improve these end-to-end value streams that enable the different teams to deliver value. Now let's have a look at what kind of activities and value streams do you need in a digital operating model. But first, if you look at what kind of practice do organizations nowadays use to develop a new operating model? And these are typically the main areas, like we use lean practices. And lean is really about focusing on the end-to-end value streams and enabling flow. And at the same time, eliminating waste. That could be handovers, manual activities, and so on. So lean is a key principle and practices that we use. Agile, of course, is deliver more in incremental, small delivery cycles, visualize the work, learn, and get feedback from customers and consumers. It's about DevOps nowadays, where we say, let's make a team accountable for the full product life cycle, eliminate silos, make ops and development work together. And IT service management still, in many organizations, we still think about ITIL or service management practices. That's really focusing on what are the value of the services we deliver, the risks and the cost associated with these services. And in the center, of course, it's about customer and product centricity. And it's about how do you blend all these different practices together in a digital operating model. I'm going to show you today how organizations typically do. Now, let's have a look at the capabilities first, because it's delivering value to the customer in a DevOps mode or in a scaled framework. There's many different building blocks you need, or many different parts, but we need to look at the bigger system of how we generate value. So today I'm going to focus on what are the key parts that make part of that value stream, and how do we make a more integrated system view out of that. Now let's start with what kind of triggers do we see in a digital operating model, because triggers typically initiate a value stream. And we have different value streams or triggers that we see. And I look at the main 4 at this moment to just highlight a bit. So the first one is really about getting new business demands in. And it's not the same as a new requirement for an existing application, but it could be like a new business opportunity. Do we want to invest in this new business opportunity that needs to change the whole customer journey, which is really about bigger things and topics we need to think about. And it could be like introducing a new service or a product that enables the business. It could also be related to optimize our product portfolio. But we also have smaller requests coming in, typically for an existing product team. And this is typically directly going to a product team like an agile backlog, that new features come in or new requirements come in, and the team can pick that requirement and they basically work from the backlog and develop and deploy that. But it's a different flow, because if an existing product has new requirements, the teams can typically maintain that in their product backlog, they continue to deliver new value. But if a new business opportunity comes in and we need to introduce maybe new products, then we need to still need to assign a team. We still need to allocate budget to that. So there are different flows, these two kind of initiations. But we also need not to forget that once something is operational, a new application is running in production, there are a number of operational value streams we need to support. And the key one is the request to fulfill is about, once something is operational, consumers need to have access to that application, for example, so they want to order something. And request management is often not really high on the agenda for DevOps organizations. So they don't, or DevOps teams, they need to realize that to create a consumption experience, end users need to be able to request access to an application or a service and request other things. Like we want to order something. And the last one, of course, if something is operational and we need to basically if there's an issue or a question, we need to initiate the ability to raise a question or ask for help and support. So these typically are the 4 different kind of workflows that you see in an organization. Now, if you continue to that flow, I would like to show you what kind of capabilities do you need in this end-to-end flow. So we're going to look at the parts now. So we have different parts that we need to optimize. And it all starts on the left side here with our product portfolio. Here it says service and application portfolio, but this is basically what are the products and services that I have in my IT portfolio. And what you typically, many organizations lack this view of what are the products and services that I have, who are the product owners, and which teams are involved. But it really starts with the journey here is understanding the products that you have. How does it enable the business from a business process perspective, business value stream? Then we move into that generate basically new demands. So we have improvement opportunities and we get new demands in from the business. And that is basically combined into a portfolio backlog. But often what you miss in many organizations is that do have a portfolio backlog, but this portfolio backlog is not linked or integrated with your portfolio of services and your enterprise architecture. So it's more like we move from project to epics instead of moving from project to product thinking. So what's in this strategy to portfolio is really about how do I translate strategy and business direction into a portfolio of services, portfolio of products, and my portfolio backlog. So this is by continuous evaluation. And that's where many organizations are struggling with. It's not just the DevOps for individual products, but really about optimizing my product portfolio, maybe rationalizing, simplifying my portfolio, and then generate new demands and basically look at the portfolio backlog from a continuous improvement perspective. And this could be like in the enterprise architecture perspective, evaluate your customer journeys, understand how a customer journeys is enabled by application and services, and then generate new ideas and demands from that. So this is strategy to portfolio. The other area is really about having a product team that continues to develop, test, and deploys their services. So this is about the continuous delivery model where we have a product backlog and we have capabilities to design, develop, and configure. We often have a CI/CD pipeline and test capabilities to continuously integrate, continuously deliver new releases. This is typically where most DevOps teams are focusing on, the continuous delivery part, and they look at the backlog, the testing, deployment. But when you deploy something in production, there is typically also something like we might need to update the catalog because we have many different products for the consumers to consume of. So it would be nice to have a catalog for end users to consume their services. Maybe we need to raise a change. And this is typically traditional service management practices. How do I integrate my pipeline into a change management system where we log the change so that we can communicate to end user and business that something has been released? And we typically, hopefully, when we start deploying services, we automatically update our configuration management system. So we understand what is deployed where, how does an application is supported by infrastructure component or cloud resources. Then let's move to the next part. So once something is deployed, we typically would like to understand how is everything connected. Let's say we deploy something in the cloud, in Azure or AWS. We want to understand what resources are linked to our application or service by the right tagging, for example. And another area in this, that whole request to fulfill, is having a capability for end users to have request initiated. So this is by the request to fulfill value stream. And in the DevOps community, you don't hear often about this request to fulfill, right? Where we have a catalog and a request management. People can have access to a business application, which link to identity management, and then fulfill those access. But typically for any product we have in production, we typically have a number of requests we need to automate and provide to our end user consumers. Typically the Amazon.com kind of experience, any type of request, can we raise it to the team and get that fulfilled? Okay, and once something's been deployed, hopefully we can automatically start monitoring our servers. Nowadays, we often talk about observability. If issues are identified, we generate events, alarms, and typically we now talk about an AIOps capability, and hopefully we can automatically remediate issues by redeploying or reconfiguring something so that the business is not impacted. And if not, we can raise an incident. Maybe we have incidents from the business and consumers. And hopefully we have some security operations activities as well involved. So we monitor, let's say, vulnerabilities and security events and take action on that. And then we have the feedback loop, hopefully from the things that happen in production, could be incident, customer feedback. And we would like to get a feedback loop back to the product teams. And typically incidents and problems are managed in a service management environment. And we need to feed that back to the teams that might work in Azure DevOps or Jira. So typically it's like a feedback loop from the production problems back to the teams. And they could be a security vulnerability that needs to fix. And we have feedback loop, of course, back to the whole product portfolio to see how well our applications and services supporting our customer journeys. So here you see the kind of key components, typically part of a DevOps model at scale. And it's not about these individual parts, but it's really about how do you integrate them all together and get that flow and feedback loops optimized. But many organizations have many initiatives to improve these capabilities in isolation. And I will show you later what's typically happening there. But to build this is still a simplified IT for IT picture of the capabilities you need and the key integrations between these capabilities. And typically many organizations use different practices to basically fuel this. They might use a skilled agile framework, as we talked about, although many organizations, as we heard about today, are not really leveraging or don't see the need to use everything in SAFe, but there are some good things in SAFe that you can leverage. We use TOGAF, for example, for enterprise architecture. We have Scrum and basically agile development practices, DevOps practices we use. ITIL is also still heavily used in the service operations processes like incident management and problem management and configuration management. Nowadays, you see more practices like site reliability engineering, focusing on how can we automate a lot of those manual activities about deployment, monitoring, get more reliable design of your services, and a lot of automation involved in day-to-day operations as well, and security. NIST, for example, for security management practices, for security monitoring, vulnerability management, zero trust, COBIT typically, and ISO 27000 for security. And then nowadays, we have more and more services running in the cloud. And suddenly organizations need to get more insight in the costs for your cloud resources and how well do we optimize resources in the cloud. And typically we talk about FinOps here, for example. But the key message is that typically in an end-to-end digital organization with all these different practices or different capabilities you see typically different practices that are blended somehow. We use some of ITIL, we use some concept from SAFe, we use DevOps, we use site reliability engineering. And I'm going to show you later on is that how you blend all these different practices, because each of these practices provide some value, but you have to select the right kind of components out of that to integrate them in your own value streams. Now, and that's where a lot of organizations are challenged. So typically, if you look at this picture, this is still a simplified capability picture. There are many initiatives that organizations are working on, but most of the initiatives are focusing on specific parts of the value stream. Like we want to improve our service and product portfolio, or we're going to implement a portfolio backlog management system where we maintain the demands and a portfolio funnel, and we have a separate solution to implement to manage the portfolio level view on value stream level, business capability level. We have the separate initiatives to improve the CI/CD pipeline, and I can continue with that. Maybe test automation initiatives. And typically what you see is we have a lot of these fragmented improvement initiatives. And it's not uncommon that there are dozens or more initiatives to improve the IT function. Maybe it's about digital experience monitoring for the monitoring side. We need to implement security operations and a SIEM for vulnerability scanning and security operations, site reliability and engineering initiatives. Self-service and self-help, for example, for having a good portal for end users to request services and have access to our business applications, for example, or join a mover lever, of course, cost management. And I can continue with that for a long time. And that's what many organizations are struggling with nowadays, that we have so many different fragmented initiatives to improve these end-to-end value streams because nobody really owns this end-to-end picture, but they own a specific part of it. And that's where you see a lot of challenges that organizations are facing. And I think it was mentioned today as well. We have a lot of part of this end-to-end value stream, and we got a lot of improvement initiatives, fragmented and not delivering the actual value potentially because they're focusing on a sub part, maybe test automation or deployment or monitoring. So the question is, what we really need to focusing on is these end-to-end flows. And I mentioned that like we have different flows we need to optimize, and I'm going to show you more in detail what kind of flows are we talking about. And as I mentioned, it could be like a new demand coming in, and it's really about how do we optimize these end-to-end flows. And from idea to demand, it uses a number of capabilities like your portfolio backlog, design, build, and test, get your minimal viable product out there. But once something is operational, we typically talk about continuous delivery where new features coming in. And as I mentioned, something is operational. We get requests coming in for somebody who needs to have access to our service or needs to load some data or get some reports. As we mentioned, we have some problems in production we need to fix. And to fix something in production, it could be like a vulnerability. Like the beginning of this year, we saw the Log4j issues. And suddenly we got a lot of servers where Log4j issues were identified, but we had no clue which applications were running on these servers, which teams needs to fix them. And that's what this flow is about. How can I identify the teams that need to fix this product, this problem for the application where the server is running for, get it into their backlog, for example, in Jira, they fix it and deploy this fix. Today, many organizations we're having difficulty to manage this end-to-end value stream. They were focusing on continuous delivery, but getting visibility from a vulnerability to fix, they didn't have. Or we have events coming in and we need to fix that. Typically, that's a value stream by itself. We detect something through monitoring, we raise an alarm, an event, we look at the impact, and to fix something, we need to maybe reboot something, modify, reconfigure something, restart something, and that uses other practices like deployment again, and so on. Now, I created the song for this of generating flow. It's a song from Robbie Williams. So hopefully you can hear the sound when I play that here.
Come and follow.
So let's have a look at how do you get flow and what type of flows do we actually need. So the first flow I want to focus on is the whole requirement to deploy. Basically, this is what most DevTop teams are focusing on, is basically shipping a new release or having a new feature that they deliver to production and create new value for the customer. But this is really about that continuous delivery or the software engineering value stream. And most value stream management activities are focusing on this specific value stream. So it starts with understanding my product backlog. Maybe the product backlog is triggered by new feature requests from the business. We get a feedback loop, as you could see here, from operations. Let's say we have problems identified, maybe vulnerability, feedback from user experience. But we also can get the topics and epics from portfolio level. Let's say new regulatory requirements come in or larger business change that impact our product. So typically there are different triggers for this value stream, but here we talk about a product team designing, building, testing, and deploying new features, including new fixes and improvements. So any improvement on the product. And this is typically the value stream that DevOps is focusing on. But I want to show you there's much more that DevOps teams need to be focusing on, because there's a separate value stream by itself for continuous operations, which is really about monitoring the service in production, detecting issues through logs, traces. Nowadays, as I mentioned, we talk about AI ops, but it's about enabling monitoring, then getting events out of the monitors, detect issues, do the impact assessment, understand the root cause, and try to remediate these. Hopefully, we can automatically remediate issues through maybe run books, maybe redeploy something, reconfigure something, and then we can have the incident resolved. This end-to-end flow is a value stream by itself, because it's basically triggered by monitoring data or events, and it's a set of components that we need to implement and automate to get this issue fixed. And this value stream by itself needs to be engineered and designed as well. And also it needs to be predefined or implemented by the different DevOps teams, in a sense they need to enable monitoring for their servers. They need to create automated remediation run books. They need to create maybe procedures to act upon specific events or issues that are raised by the customer. So this is another operational value stream that you need to focus on, which has their own triggers, their own flows, and their own value for the customer. In this case, the value or the trigger could be, of course, the customer complained or we have an issue and we get that fixed so the customer can continue working, or it's really about preventing any business impact so the customer doesn't even know that we have fixed something. But it's a value stream by itself, and end-to-end flow. Another flow is more on the portfolio side and is about this whole strategy to portfolio, the planning side. So this is typically a continuous flow as well, where we evaluate how well are our products and services. So basically it starts with the architecture and the customer journey. So we evaluate how well is our product portfolio aligned with the business strategy, how well do our customer journeys and enable the customer, how well is it supported by IT, what do we need to improve, are we investing in the right things, can we maybe simplify and rationalize our portfolio, because we still have a lot of legacy application out there, migrate them to the cloud. So there's a lot of decision making to be done here, and it's typically triggered by a continuous evaluation of your portfolio, understand how well this supports the business, trigger new demands and prioritize them, and that generates new portfolio backlogs. And some organization would say, yeah, but this is not a value stream by itself, because what is the value? But it is a closed loop in the sense we need to continuously evaluate our portfolio, understand the value that we deliver to the customer, and prioritize our biggest topics. And then after that, of course, if we want to deliver something, we could maybe start with a small ideation to concept phase. Like we don't develop maybe a new product immediately, but we maybe need to prototype, validate the viability of this new product idea. So if we have a bigger new investment that we need to invest in, typically there's a small value stream idea to concept that we say, let's experiment first. Maybe it's a prototype, maybe it's just test that with a number of consumers, whether it is a viable new product. And once that is a viable new product, we can basically assign the whole team that maintains this and do the continuous delivery and continuous improvement. And the idea to concept typically is a different type of workflows as well, because you don't start with the whole CI/CD pipeline yet. You might only do concept validation, understand the viability of the new service. Another aspect that I would like to show you is about the whole consumption management and user experience related to that. So this is really about if something is delivered in production, we also need to update our catalog. Now, as you can imagine, a consumer customer for a large organization has maybe hundreds of products. Some organizations have thousands of different IoT products or digital products, applications. So we need to make sure that we can automatically, once a new release has been created, we update our service catalog so people can consume the service. So we have the optimal consumption experience. And that typically triggers the request to fulfill or the delivery value stream. And this is a value stream that most organizations they don't have, as I mentioned. They have different places to request maybe access to a service or request services from a team. But this is really about designing this end-to-end flow of how do you request something, it's approved, it's fulfilled and provisioned. And it could be infrastructure requests, like I need a new server, new database, or it could be about join and move a lever. A new employee comes in the organization and needs access to these business applications, or somebody's roles is changing in the organization and needs to have access to different applications. So it links to identity and access management, request fulfillment. And here, DevOps teams need to implement this as well, because as a product owner, you also need to design the type of request an end user can raise for your product or application. You need to integrate your application into identity and access management with the right roles and responsibilities and access rights. And you need to provision those requests and you automate those as well. And then we have the last value stream is really about continuous evaluation, continuous improvement, where you basically evaluate what's happening in operations and look at some of the things that we need to improve. Because it could be that we have resolved some incidents, we have a workaround for it, and then we need to identify, okay, how can we structurally fix this problem? Like maybe a permanent fix, we might have a workaround, and we might also have a continuous feedback loop in the product portfolio and have ideation to improve our portfolio. And as you could see is that you typically have different kind of flows you have in your organization to optimize. So it's probably not sufficient to just assume we have one value stream for IT, let's say the continuous delivery, the whole getting a new feature in production. We also have other flows we need to optimize our IT organization. In this case, we see here 7 key flows that you need to optimize. And if you think about optimizing these flows, and we look at now at the tooling side, because now we're moving into the value stream management, we typically have many different tools or capabilities that we need to integrate. And we see a more increasing complexity of our DevOps tool chain. And this is a simplified picture still, but you can imagine we need a capability to manage our portfolio of services and products. We manage our portfolio backlog, we do our source code, our build, our test, the various testing solutions like security testing as well, deployment, monitoring, and various monitoring components, security, log analytics, AIOps. We still have a service management system to manage our incidents. Hopefully we have some CMDB, so we know what resources in the cloud or on-premise are linked to this specific application that provides context for an incident, an event that appears. Self-service portals to get that consumption experience for our end users that consume our products and services. And we have collaboration tools and various node reporting. But it's not about individual tools anymore and to optimize those, but really how do you integrate all these different tools together? And then we talk about integration, end-to-end value stream automation. Now, as you can see, this tooling landscape that we have, and this is still a simplified picture, but it shows you a bit of the DevOps tooling landscape as we see today. And as you can see, there's many different tools that organizations are using. And typically, many organizations, large organizations, have a very fragmented tooling landscape. They got various backlog tools, maybe different instances of Jira. We have maybe DevOps, Azure DevOps, and Jira and GitLab next to each other. We have many different monitoring tools, many different deployment. And we also have other solutions that we need, like from security perspective or risk management, financial management. As you can see, there's a growing complexity of this whole tool environment, the DevOps tool chain. And one key area that you see nowadays happening is that there's a specific tool category emerging, is that the value stream management tools that really enable this traceability across all these tools, maybe from idea to production, or it could also be if we have an incident that we need to fix. So how do you get traceability across these different tools and practices? And there's an emerging tooling landscape, as you see some of the vendors here that focus on this specific topic of getting end-to-end traceability and integrate also the flows of data through all these different applications that you have to manage your IT. And that's one of the key areas that I want to focus to, the data side of things, because you see that our business is becoming more data-driven. And we also in the IT organization need to be focusing on the data, become more data-driven organizations, understand the data that we have. And here you see many of the different repositories out there in IT. It could be our portfolio backlog, our product portfolio, cost management, architecture, or backlog tools, development, testing, monitoring tools, vulnerabilities. There's a lot of fragmented data, and we typically don't have traceability or much insight across this data. And that's where value stream management fits in, is how can we create this end-to-end visibility across these different capabilities, the data within them, so that we can optimize these end-to-end flows and value streams. And let me demonstrate a bit how that typically works. So here we show a simplified picture again from the different capabilities you need. And what do you need to create value stream flow, and how do you create data-driven operating model? So typically, as I mentioned, it starts on the left side, understand your customer journeys. And this is the business view of things, not talk about the IT view, but really a customer that is consuming business services, the value streams that are used, like hire to retire, if I think about HR, order to cash. And they're dependent on different capabilities, like a CRM capability or a web shop. And there's data involved in the business side. And that's typically enabled by one or more IT products and services. Nowadays, we typically talk about a digital product, or in the past, we talk about applications. But it's really about understanding how my customer journey is enabled by digital products. And that is typically linked into risk management, for example. We have traceability. What are the risks associated with the product? And it could be data privacy related items. So typically businesses need to do risk assessments, identify the controls and policies that need to be implemented to make this product safe. And that's important to highlight as well. It's not just about delivering faster and more value for the customer. We also need to develop our services secure. And we need to comply with compliancy, data privacy, for example, and that kind of security related compliance and controls. So we need to design that as well as part of the other aspects of a system. And we continuously evaluate our products. So that's where it starts. You always look at the customer's journeys, look at the product portfolio, and that drives new ideas and demands, and that will be stored in a portfolio backlog. And here you see the key data entities. We have the customer journey down to the products and services. And we have new demands coming in, which we need to evaluate, build our portfolio epics, our portfolio backlog, link to strategic goals, objectives, and themes. But the key question here is, how can I create traceability of my portfolio epics, and how does that impact my customer journeys, or impact my value streams from business, or impact my product? These lines are typically lacking in many organizations. They don't have this traceability from epics down to the products and services, because what they have done is basically replaced the project concept with an epic, but don't link epics to the actual business context. Now, the next step is, of course, we also need visibility into cost and budgets. Then we go into the product and team backlogs. Typically here we talk about features and stories, like the ones that you store in Jira or Azure DevOps. So here we have a team that manages the features or stories, but we need traceability from these components back to the portfolio epics. We also need traceabilities. What is on the backlog associated with which product? And today, many organizations don't have this link. So we might have 500 applications or products in our portfolio, but have no clue where is the backlog for that product. Because Jira or Azure DevOps just have a pile of project teams and with stories, but we don't have traceability, which product story belongs to which product. Now, then we have our source code, which is traceable back to the story. Of course, if somebody does a code commit, a merge request, we understand, okay, this code change is linked to this story or feature. And then we need to understand which pipelines there are. A pipeline is a data entity by itself. We have different pipelines for different products and services. So a pipeline and product releases should be linked to the product portfolio. So where are my builds stored? Who owns those builds, and how they are created through pipeline? So this is about that end-to-end traceability from the builds down to the product again. And of course, the pipeline triggers tests, and tests results into bugs or issues, and that we need to be fixed. So we have this end-to-end flow from data across the different solutions. And once we want to deploy something into an operating environment, could be different environments like test and production, we could raise a change informing the business that we have something to deploy in production. We have a deployment component that results into updates in our products. A product has different instances in different environments, development, test, production. So you need to register those different environments, because we use those environments for tagging, because we would like to understand which cloud resources or servers and databases are linked to this specific environment, like a test or a production environment. So somehow we need to maintain which environments do we have, what resources or resource groups are linked to that. So we understand the cost, we understand the risks, and we can start monitoring those. And as I mentioned, we also have a catalog that we hopefully update the catalog when new versions become available. We can raise requests, and requests are linked to access rights, and requests are fulfilled through deployment mechanisms as well. And as I mentioned, we have different monitors in production that link to our products and services. We got events that hopefully we can remediate through automation. We might raise automatically each incident in our service management system, link that to knowledge items, and an incident might be resolved through standard requests. And of course, we have security vulnerabilities, and typically we have different solutions for that, like a monitoring tool for security, like a SIEM, or we have a vulnerability scanner tool or compliance scannings, and that results into issues that we need to fix as well. So we raise a problem in our service management system, have the feedback loop down back to the defect that the people have in Jira or Azure DevOps. Now, this is still a simplified model, but the key message here is, what kind of data do I need in my IT organization to manage these end-to-end flows? Where is this data mastered? Where do I manage my portfolio epics? Where do I manage my product portfolio? Where do I manage the deployments? But more importantly, how do I integrate and link all these data elements, all these different parts together so that I have end-to-end flow and have traceability? And as you can imagine, you have to design this. This is not just happening by itself by implementing all these various tools, because each of these tools, whether it's a service management system like ServiceNow and Atlassian Jira, different architecture tools, your Jenkins and your pipeline tools, deployment and monitoring tools, they all come with their own data models, but they're not very well integrated. So that's where it's so important to focus on this data, define where the data lives in your system, and be able to trace and integrate all these different components together to create this flow and traceability. So that's a key challenge that many organizations still facing, is because they don't take a data view on this. They talk about tools, they talk about value streams and so on, but they don't take a data view. So one of the key recommendations is take a more data-driven approach to your IT value streams and your IT or digital delivery model. So again, data-driven IT, that is the new superpower. If you are able to trace back from idea to production and have traceability or feedback loop from production incident back to the defects to your teams, that is a really new superpower. And to create this new superpower, you need something, not just this traceability, you also need what I call the service and product backlog. And this is what in IT for IT is called the product backlog bone. It's basically the foundational data, like understanding a customer journey, understand your business products, how does that link into IT? That is basically providing the context of anything you do in IT, whether it's an incident or a problem or a portfolio item. It's all linked to this product and service you deliver to the customer, and how does that enable my business or customer journeys? So summarizing this presentation a bit is, you really need to look at the bigger picture, and you need to design basically all the different parts that are part of these end-to-end value streams. We have many different parts, as you can see here, different capabilities like your backlog tools, your development, your testing, your monitoring, your service management system, your CMDB. And these capabilities are leveraged by multiple value streams. So we have a value stream like delivering a new feature in production, but we also have a value stream to fix issues or incidents or fulfill service requests. And typically, a lot of these capabilities are used by multiple value streams. So you need to design and architect them. And as I mentioned, also focusing on the data and the integrations that you need. Another aspect is then that you're starting to define these end-to-end flows that you need to optimize, the value stream, and also be starting to define ownership. Who is really owning these value streams, and who should be able to continuously improve them and explain the teams, because different teams will use these value streams to deliver value. And how can we create that kind of community in the organization? And then, of course, you start assessing and evaluating your value streams, do gap analysis, start with an MVP to improve them, and create a culture for continuous improvement as well, so that we can start improving these end-to-end value streams. And I can assure it's pretty challenging, because if you think about this end-to-end IT value streams that are enabled by, let's say, IT for IT, kind of IT solutions to run IT, that's typically owned by different people. So we have different teams that look at backlog tools, monitoring, but we don't have an integrated view. So that's, I think, the key change. We need to focus on these value streams and define ownership for all these capabilities, part of these end-to-end value streams, and focus on the flow and integration between all these different components. So how can you typically start your own journey in this? It would be a good start to take, for example, IT for IT as a reference architecture, basically showing these building blocks, the data flows and integration, look at your current state, design the target state, and define a high-level roadmap, how to get there. How do I get more continuous improvement on these value streams? And hopefully, and then I'm finalizing my presentation, is that typically in the past, we tried to improve parts of the value stream. Maybe it's test automation, maybe it's monitoring, maybe it's deployment. So that's what we did in the past. We implemented those components, but we didn't improve end-to-end value stream because we need to rethink how we manage our processes, our people and teams. But now it really needs to think about with value stream management, how do you connect all these components together to build a more integrated digital delivery model so that you can design the components part of these value streams and be able to integrate them and get the data exchange between all these different moving components. Now, finalizing with that, that's the end of this presentation. Hopefully you can use that in your own organization as well. Think about these different flows in your organization, these 7 flows, understand how you support them through tools and data integration and start your own journey to improve these end-to-end flows. I would like to thank you for listening to this presentation. I'm not sure if we still have time for some questions, but hopefully you have a good day as well, and I wish you a good journey.